Who's advocating for parental choice and health sovereignty in California? What can we do to promote ethical medical care and informed consent in our Golden State? Hello, and welcome to Within with Dr. Azadeh Khatibi. I'm delighted to have on the show today Ms. Darrlene Alquiza, Ms. Jessica Cabrera, and Ms. Kris Dukes. Together, they make up Informed Policy Advocates. IPA is a nonpartisan organization advocating for informed consent, civil rights, and consumer protections in California. They are now pursuing creating a formal request for a California Senate informational hearing regarding school vaccine exemption policies and implementation practices, which you can find more about at IPAaction.com. We're going to be discussing their push for that hearing and their work in Sacramento advocating for health freedom and healthcare choices of you and your families and protecting medical freedom through legislative initiatives. We'll be touching upon the state of medical freedom affairs at the state capitol, transparency in public health policy, public oversight, the power and level of physicians' discretion with individual patients versus the push to standardize everyone to certain state-imposed public health practices, and how that affects the health and healthcare choices of individuals and the education of our children and our families here in California. I am delighted to have them with me today. Darrlene, Kris, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Super excited for this conversation. Why don't you guys just start off by telling our dear listeners a little bit about yourselves? Darrlene.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. So I'm Darrlene Alquiza. I've been doing advocacy work since 2003, specifically to education rights. I have a background in early childhood education. I have a science degree in child and adolescent development, master's degree in human development with a special interest in early childhood education, and also a special interest in brain development. And my interest in the issue that Informed Policy Advocates pushes for in Sacramento is specific to a personal story where my daughter, I have to homeschool her because she's not allowed in public school. That's why I'm here today.
Jessica?
Very similar to Darrlene, we're all moms that were personally impacted by California policies that were not well thought out. My name is Jessica Cabrera, and I am involved in this because I'm very passionate about the politics that are going on around us that are impacting our kids and our families here in California. Personally, I have 3 daughters are homeschooled. Our issue right now is that we can't even be able to play sports at our local school. Our children are not allowed a public school education if we are not complying with all of the very burdensome mandates that the state of California has imposed on us. So my fight is personal here. I'm very invested in this because I want to make sure that the future we leave behind for our kids is something that we're proud of and something that is inclusive and equitable for every child in California.
And you started your advocacy path in 2019, right? When you started becoming more involved in legislation?
Yes. So I was actually aware in 2015 when SB 277 had passed, but my daughters were not of school age yet. So during that time and into 2019, I was keeping an eye on what was going on. And when I saw 2019 and SB 276 come about, I said, you know what? Enough is enough. I can't sit here on the sidelines and watch anymore. You know, we're doers. We're ready to get involved. And this was an issue that had affected us so deeply that we had no choice but to put on our boots and say, let's get to work and figure this out.
And Kris, you're also a co-founder of Informed Policy Advocates. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. My name is Kris Dukes. I'm one of the co-founders of Informed Policy Advocates. I'm also the outreach and research director for this organization. A little bit about my background. I actually have a degree in sports medicine and kinesiology. Then I got into the film industry for a while. And then that's when I started having children. I got into this issue because my daughter was severely by the vaccine schedule, where she is cognitively impaired, has seizures, autism, encephalitis, a plethora of issues. So while battling that, I had to pull out of the workforce to take care of her. And when it came time for exemptions in 2015, when they had the personal belief exemption, which is no problem. We had we'll discuss a little bit further on the history and how we got to the policies we are today. But in 2015, she had a religious exemption when they removed religious exemptions, and we were able to get a medical exemption at the time. But when 276 came around, that pretty much null and voided anything once you reach the next grade span. And doctors will no longer write them. So as severe as she is, I can't not get a medical exemption for my daughter. So These are policies that are affected thousands of families in the state. I know I'm not the only one. No matter how extreme or where you are on the spectrum of injury, or possibly your sibling might be potentially injured, you no longer have the autonomy, or your doctor has autonomy to make those proper medical decisions. I'm passionate about this issue, and I tell people all the time, we are heavily invested because this affects us personally, and we don't want to see anybody else have to go through what we have gone through, and that's why we're so personally invested in this.
Yeah, and you guys are showing up every day, playing that role of advocacy for health freedom and choices for parents, and really shaping those conversations inside the Capitol. And you guys are doing it with conviction. And I had the pleasure of going to the California State Capitol with you to lobby with you and attend a hearing on legislation that would have broadened the scope of physicians' abilities to write vaccine exemptions in California. And unfortunately, that didn't pass, but it paved the way for some of the work and advocacy that you're doing now, for calling for this legislative hearing that you're pushing for. And we're going to talk about that. But just to round out the introductions, listeners, these ladies, they are organized, they are dedicated, they are devoted. I was in awe of them. They're go, go, go when I was with them at the Capitol in Sacramento, meeting with the legislators. I've got their folders. They've got their beautiful media and legislative informational packets, and super organized. And I saw you guys creating those relationships. People recognized you. Legislators recognized you. When doors were closing, because they recognized you, because you had put in that work, they opened the door and said, oh, yeah, what do you want to tell me? What's going on today? And I was just blown away, because you tell me sometimes you go to Sacramento multiple times a week to do this job. That's incredible drive and dedication. And so I just want to start out by saying thank you. But why don't we also step back by just saying how you three got together to create Informed Policy Advocates, and why. You've already talked a little bit about it, but a little bit more about why you created it, how you came together to create the organization that's doing this work now.
Sure. I could start by sharing how I met Jessica and Kris. So back in 2019, I started consulting with other parents because they wanted to talk to their legislators, but they didn't know how. So people would call me and say, I have a new mom. She wants help to talk to her legislator. Sure, have them call me. And I do little consultation calls. And so one day I had a friend, introduce me to Jessica, and we hit it off right away. I let her know some key things that she could do to improve her conversations with the legislators. And she just blossomed into this powerhouse of who can I talk to? How can I convince them? And just seeing her energy, I felt like, wow, this is somebody I really need to work with. She's amazing. And then Kris, I drove 2 hours to speak to an assemblywoman. It was a walk and talk event at a park. And, somehow we just ended up at the same table, because it's like, okay, what are you here to talk about? Okay, I'm here to talk about the same thing. I gave my spiel, she gave her spiel to the assembly member. And after, it was like, you had really good things to say. I think we should work together. And she turned around and said, I really liked what you had to say. We should work together. And from 2019 up until this point, we have been working cohesive. And I personally feel like they are a blessing from God.
Well, thank you for that, Darlene. And likewise, Darlene is an absolute powerhouse in Sacramento, especially when it comes to the policies, and not only the policies, but how she also educates others on how to get involved and understanding the process of things. As an educator, that comes in handy. And I think each of our individual skill sets really aligned us to come together and to be, that glue that's putting together this infrastructure that's ready to push back against government policies that just are not working for families. And we all hit a point last year where we said, this is the 10th year of active advocacy on behalf of so many families in California since SB 277 has passed. And what are we going to do? Are we going to turn around and say, okay, we're going to put down our fight and say we're done and this is just how it's going to be? Or are we going to put our foot forward and really battle back against what's been going on? So that's what we chose to do. And we said, let's give it one more good round and try to really accomplish something that has not been able to be done here in California in so long. But now we have the data behind us. We have families behind us. We have so many great organizations that have been pushing this forward. And I think us being able to really cross that finish line and get to that point where we're making that effective change, it's coming and it's actually here and we're living it. So it's an exciting moment. It's exhausting, but it's just so extremely exciting that we are even here at this point and even able to have these conversations.
Yeah, Jessica, I do feel that, and working with you guys and lobbying with you guys and hearing your insights on how things have shifted and people are more open, which we can talk more about, that is something that gives me hope and, pushes me to try to do my part and then to also spread the word about what you guys are doing. Can you talk a little bit about what you've accomplished since you have started working together with Informed Policy Advocates?
Sure. I'll just talk about what we've been able to accomplish in the past year. Last year in the summer, we had a meeting with Senator Ben Allen, who's a senior Democrat out of Southern California. And he is actually the co-author of the bill that started all of these problems. We've talked about SB 277 from 2015. That is the bill that took away non-medical exemptions. He was the co-author of that bill. Our team was able to sit with him with our registered lobbyists, and we were able to explain to him that, although you had good intentions, these are the chilling effects. These are the problems that families are experiencing now. And he literally was like, I had concerns. I had ideas that things might happen, but now I've seen it come to fruition. And I want to help you and I want to address this. So he actually agreed to write a letter to the California Department of Public Health, which is the executive branch that distributes the medical exemptions, decides if they're allowed or not, to ask them, I have concerns. What are your directives? What are your processes? Tell me about what you're doing specifically, because I have some concerns I'd like to address. So that was our first biggest win. No other time in the movement has any other organization or any other legislator taken specific action to address the problems with the current policies. And he gave his letter. We worked with him for 6 months, and he was able to send that letter officially to the Department of Health in January of this year. So that was, I think, our first big win in this last year. Soon after that, there was a bill that was introduced. SB 1377 was a bill that was trying to repeal the whole SB 276 language that makes it specifically for the executive branch to give the medical exemptions. It was a very heavy bill. And so unfortunately, it didn't pass, but not without the four of us being together in Sacramento. And that was such a great time to have you as a subject matter expert there. I think your ability to talk about your perspective with your background in public health really helped us make an impact, because with that, we were able to get some of the Democrats who were planning to vote no to instead abstain, which is a big deal for the cause, because it means I'm not saying no. I'm saying, there might be some things that we still need to work out the kinks on. And so that was another big win. With that, in the hearing, the chair of the committee specifically said the best way to approach this is an informational hearing. And last year's chair, who was in the membership of the health committee for the Senate side, actually called out Jessica Cabrera and said, Jessica Cabrera is my constituent, and she had requested an informational hearing since last year. And together, they've repeatedly stated during that hearing, we need to have an informational hearing.
Yeah, that was a really kind of goosebumps moment when she called you out at the hearing. And it's a testament to the work that you guys are doing and the consistency at which you're doing it, because you're doing the work, you're showing up and creating those relationships. And I saw that firsthand about how that legislator opened up to you throughout the day, actually, because we saw her multiple times.
Right.
I mean, Jessica was talking to her, I think, at the airport on her way back in Los Angeles. She found her. And so, I mean, that's consistency. And that's what we need, right? To keep pressure for the things that we want to promote and the medical freedom and medical choice that we want to promote for families. So let's take a step back and talk about, since California's vaccine exemption system has been created, what are some of the concerns that families and physicians have been voicing that we want the legislators to know about? What's actually happening at the level of the individuals and families that are affected by these laws?
I think there's a wide array of issues. And this is what we always talk about. There's so many different sectors within that bill that have really affected the way that the law has been implemented. One of the biggest battles and hurdles that we've seen as advocates is just the basic ability to even find a doctor willing to discuss possibly having a medical exemption. I mean, families are not only terrified of having the conversation about why they're choosing to make specific health decisions, But then you couple that with now you have a doctor who is very abrasive to the idea because the healthcare companies that they work for have come down on them and said, no exemptions, no exceptions. This is our standard of care here within our facility. So it's created this bubble for families that it's been very difficult for them to receive the adequate medical care that they need without being discriminated against because of the medical choices that they're making for their children. I know Darlene can speak a little bit more to how that's affected her personally as well. I think that's the beauty and how unique our team is that we've all had these lived experiences with these laws. Yeah, Darlene, if you wanted to share.
So there are 5 things that I can share about the current policies and why they're creating problems for families and for doctors. One is the fact that at all the CDPH has anything to do with granting a medical exemption. First and foremost, it should be decided between a doctor and the patient or the family and the parents of the child, whether or not that child actually needs a medical exemption and should get an exemption. But currently, the California Department of Public Health is the one who makes that ultimate decision of if the child should get a medical exemption and resultingly, if that child should be allowed at school. And that goes for public school and private school. So whether or not that child could be in a classroom with peers is literally decided by the California Department of Public Health, which is an executive branch institution. That is a huge problem. It should only be decided by the doctors of that child. The other problem that a lot of families are facing, specifically my child had this issue, is the grade span checkpoint. So currently, if a child reaches kindergarten, 7th grade, they have to it's basically a grade span checkpoint where the nurses can recheck your file. If you've previously had an exemption, like my daughter did, she had a permanent medical exemption. They said, well, this is a grade span checkpoint. You have to go through the CAIR system. And if you can't provide that, I'm sorry, but your child cannot continue into junior high. At the time, my daughter's hospital network created a new policy that they don't do medical exemptions as a blanket policy. That is the third thing. What we're seeing now is hospital networks and even private practices, they're creating blanket policies that they don't do medical exemptions. And it could be for a couple of different reasons. One is because a doctor will be flagged if they write 5 or more exemptions. If a doctor doesn't want to be flagged and have to defend their license to the medical board, they'll just create a blanket policy. I'm sorry, we don't do that. You have to find another doctor. I've actually had parents say, the oncologist said that I shouldn't let my children get the MMR because I'm getting my chemotherapy and they don't want me to get the shedding from the MMR. But the oncologist said, I'm sorry, I can't write that, but this is my recommendation, which is a real disservice to the people that they're serving.
I mean, it's completely, in my view, completely unethical, and it's abandoning the patient and the needs of the patient. It's frightening. It's like dystopian.
We had some examples, some doctors that originally were writing them, even writing a temporary exemption. Everything was legitimate, all paperwork was fine, but they still got dragged before the medical board because they wrote more than 5. And the hassle of that, even though they did not get disciplined, everything was fine, kind of said, keep better paperwork. The hassle of going through that, the monetary cost, everything like that, their policies are, I'm not going to write them because they're not going to go through that. They don't have that kind of time. They don't have that money, and they don't want to risk their licenses, especially the younger doctors. So we are seeing this pattern across the states for what Darlene is telling us is that these systemic policies that are across the state now, where most doctors are HMOs or group practices, just will not write them.
And it's chilling the speech of the doctor, and it's chilling the speech and the behavior. It's chilling the behavior of the doctor. So they're actually, because of these laws, no longer acting in really their purest fiduciary role for the patient. And as a fiduciary, doctors are supposed to do what's best for the patient. So these laws are actually changing their behavior such that they're not really doing what they feel is best for the patient. They are doing what they need to lay low and not get in trouble, not to create waves at their institution or whatever institution they're at, because now 75% of doctors in the United States work for somebody else, and they're not their own private actor anymore. And I think that's really, really sad, and it's a detriment to what's happening. It's actually infuriating. It's a detriment to what we need to be doing for the state of patients and patient care. I do want to kind of explain. So SB 276 and SB 714, these were 2 kind of paired legislation that created the medical exemption digitized system where the state could then, because it's in digital format, follow along all medical exemptions, follow who's writing them, flag doctors who are writing more than 5, or they can also see if at a certain school the vaccination rate goes down to below 95, that gets flagged for further investigation at that particular school. And it also created the 5 exemption, no more requirement. Correct? Am I missing anything?
No, absolutely. And to your point about SB 714, I do want to make a note because I think it's important to mention. Me and Kris were actually at the Capitol when SB 276 passed. And then we were given specifically an opportunity to speak with the governor's staff. So we had a sit-down meeting with the governor's staff, and Kris Dukes explained to them the ex post facto law, which would basically say if your child has a permanent medical exemption, they should have that grandfathered in, because you cannot make something that was previously valid all of a sudden invalid. And that was what created SB 714. That trailer bill specifically wrote in the parameters to grandfather in those currently valid medical exemptions, saving thousands of children from getting kicked out of school. So, I think it's really important that you brought that up. So thank you for that. And then the one other chilling effect that I wanted to bring up is the 9,000 doctors. So during that hearing that we attended together, the chair had mentioned there were 29 doctors who were reprimanded specific to the vaccine mandate policy. One of the things that wasn't mentioned during that hearing is there's actually a 119-page list of doctors, 9,000 doctors who cannot write medical exemptions for vaccination because they've received any type of disciplinary action, not related to vaccines at all. It could be a probation. It could be literally any of the things that doctors get reprimanded for. The way that the law was written was so broad that any disciplined doctor cannot write a medical exemption. When we've talked to school nurses about it, they would say, yes, we do have to refer to that list. And if a doctor is on that list, then we cannot accept that medical exemption. So that's something that I think is very chilling about the current law. Also, literally when we had a meeting with a legislator, I had that list with me and the legislator grabbed it out of my hand and said, let me see that list. I want to know if my friends are on there. Like, he thought it was funny.
Wow.
But at the same time, it's like, this is damning. How can you think this is like funny?
Yeah. Another concerning thing I think about those 2 laws is it puts the exemption revocation guidelines based on what the ACIP committee and what CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics state as like their guidelines. So, and we've seen how some of those organizations have become, in my view, sometimes even radicalized or really imbalanced in terms of viewpoints. And then they can sometimes even now they've become politicized, where 50% of the country or 50% of legislators doesn't trust in ACIP anymore, and the other 50% does. So if it's become something that's so mercurial, then what we're saying is we're going to base our vaccine exemption system on committees that may have been hijacked by certain people. For example, I think the American Academy of Pediatrics is not fully representative of what all pediatricians in America actually think. And there's new organizations that are springing up to counter American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as if you have something that's changing in Washington based on every new president, that creates a lot of insecurity for the people of California, because they don't know, oh, with the next term, if the ACIP changes, are my rights going to be taken away from my children? So there's problems with the laws as they are written. And it's, I think, related to the fact that it's not individual doctors, and the guidelines are not allowing individual doctors to have that freedom and to do what they think is best for that individual patient sitting in front of them. It's a very top-down, control-oriented system, and that's really detrimental to the practice of medicine.
Absolutely. And I can show you just how disjointed and broken the system is. We had a pediatrician who shared with us that in writing a medical exemption for a patient, and she's been a pediatrician for over 45 years, the medical exemption was granted. The child was able to start school. 1 year later, the CDPH came back and said, actually, we made a mistake. We're revoking it.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, without any explanation, without saying, you know what, can you give us additional information? Can you do these additional tests? Can you answer these questions, or, any kind of communication or back and forth? It was, we're revoking it. The child can't go to school.
And how clear is the appeals process for parents who've had exemptions revoked?
The doctors that we've talked to, they said that the CDPH doesn't give them any information about it. Some of the doctors that we've talked to who've had exemptions revoked didn't even know that there was an appeals process. So had they known, they could have appealed, given the additional information, or try to have some relationship with the CDPH to say, what can we do to make sure that this child is protected and gets the care that they need? They weren't informed at all, which makes the letter from Senator Allen so much more important, because when he supported the laws being changed, he said, I want to make sure that doctors can write exemptions for whatever they deem necessary, even if it's for family medical history, even if it's for, the dad, the sibling, the uncle who had a reaction. If the doctor believes there is risk, they should be able to grant that exemption. And now that's not the case. Part of the directives that he was asking for is, what are the parameters for accepting or approving a medical exemption? What is your appeals process? How do you support the doctors in these things? And one of the other things is there any kind of punishment when you revoke an exemption? That's one of the things that we're also looking at as well. We see that there are doctors that they try to do an exemption, it gets revoked. And then the tendency is if they do another one, that one also gets revoked. So are they monitoring and then basing it off of, you've written one too many, I'm just going to start turning them all down?
That's a problem that we see too, where California has absolutely politicized medicine. And the process that they've used to implement these laws has not been transparent by any means. I mean, from the top down, there is no transparency. There's no clear guidelines. Doctors are just operating in the dark when it comes to their patients. And that's extremely harmful when you are trying to raise a family and raise healthy children, and you want to be able to have that sacred patient-doctor relationship. And that has been completely dismantled here in California, because there is no more, patient-doctor anything, no conversation. Now you have the care system involved in places that it should not be involved, and you have no option to opt out of any digitized system like that, as you had mentioned. So I think when we now look at what the implementation process has looked like, what I say is always, when the rubber meets the road, what does that look like and how does that play out? We have seen nothing but problems on top of problems because of bills like this. And, the doctors are getting to a point where they're also being shut down by organizations like the CMA, California Medical Association, and them coming forward and saying, well, everything's fine. Our doctors are happy with this. And no, they're not, because they're not representing everybody. And you saw it firsthand. I mean, at that hearing for SB 1377, they gave the wrong facts. They were saying that on the 5th revocation, that the doctor would then be reprimanded or investigated. That is not true. It's not the 5th revocation. It's the 5th exemption that they write. Now you have in public on record that they don't even have their own information correct, because again, everybody is operating in the dark and there is no clear transparency on what the protocol and what the parameters are. And that's unacceptable. Bottom line.
I mean, CMA did the same thing to physicians several years ago during COVID with the AB 2098 bill. I saw a video of one of their representatives giving the wrong information about the bill to their CMA member doctors at a meeting. And there were a couple doctors who stood up and called them out and said, that is not correct. You're giving the wrong information about this law. And, it's shocking that they didn't even know what the law was. They're giving the wrong information about it's the medical misinformation law that we were successfully able to put pressure on the California government to get repealed. But it's kind of frightening that they're doing that. And now you're pointing out again that they did the same thing. So during that hearing, and if it hadn't been for those doctors at that meeting speaking up, they would have just gone along with it. If it hadn't been for you guys pointing out, hey, they gave that wrong information at the hearing, they would have gotten away with it, with their irresponsibility or their twisting of information, however way you want to look at it. And that's why I think your role is so, so crucial, because we need people kind of dissecting what these organizations and lobby groups say and pointing out those errors and kind of airing it out. And I think this goes to the next thing I want to discuss, which is the work that you're doing on a special campaign that you want the public to get involved in, this informational hearing. in the state Senate. Can you tell me about that work to formally request that informational hearing and what it's about and what it would do and how people can get involved at the ipaaction.com website?
Yes, our campaign, we launched that on June 1st. Our lobbyists officially put in a request with the Senate Health Chair, Weber Pearson, for an informational hearing pertaining to the problems and the issues to do with the medical exemption policies in this state. We essentially were kind of calling her out. She said about 11 times during that hearing that you were attending that we need an informational hearing. So we are saying, put your money where your mouth is. We want an informational hearing. We are doing it through the right channels per your instructions and getting that going. So now what we're doing, now we have that request put in on the legislative side, we want to have a public campaign that helps put pressure on these legislators to set a date. We put this campaign out where I call it one-click action. All you have to do is you go to our ipaaction.com. There's a little spot on the main center of the website. It tells you a little bit more about what the campaign's about. But if you want to go right to it, you click take action and you just fill out your information and click send, and it will send an email and tweet your legislator up, especially the Senate Health Chair, but also the entire Senate Health Committee, asking for them to set a date for this hearing and how vital it is. We want to have this hearing done before this end of this legislative session. We want the voices of the public, the doctors, the health advocates, everyone, both sides. And we've even said this in our letter. We want both sides of the aisle, both sides of the issue to represent at this informational hearing, to have this on public record. Because once these things are on public record, that is a foundation to set up for legislation to help repair the issue. But we got to get things on public record, and we need the voices heard.
And so this hearing would then be a way to kind of air everything out for both sides to talk about and address transparency issue, the chilled speech and the chilled behavior of physicians, the fact that physicians that might have gotten reprimanded for something small to no longer be able to write an exemption, the incorrect information the CMA is giving out about when the physician is dinged or flagged, all of these things and more probably that you guys want to talk about are going to be discussed at the informational hearing, so that the idea is then everybody gets ideally on the same page after this informational hearing, that areas that need further investigation will hopefully then be identified and investigated further by the legislators and the various executive departments of the California government. And so that the pain points will be identified that future legislation can then address, or that the system can be cleaned a little bit? Or what other goals do you guys have?
It is definitely that. I would also add that on top of us getting it and being transparent, it's also a timing thing. You know, a lot of the legislators that were here during the passage of those first two bills are reaching the ends of their term. So for us, it's really holding their feet to the fire, holding them accountable for the change that they had said they'd like to see, or the support that they have made public for some families. We really want to make sure that we're rounding that out before we have a new slate of legislators to keep lobbying and rallying up.
Legislative process, this is exactly what needs to happen. To have an informational hearing is the foundation of legislative change. And this would be an opportunity to have stakeholders on both sides, both having the Department of Public Health come and answer the questions that the legislators are requiring of them to answer. I think that's the important number one thing that needs to happen. I think the second thing that needs to happen is we need to have people sharing their experiences. Part of what's going to happen with an informational hearing is doctors will be able to come out and share the research and the data that they're finding. Doctors are going to be able to come out and talk about what's happening in their clinics and in their offices. And then because it's a public hearing too, people will be able to come out and share their personal experiences of how the current policies are affecting their families specifically.
One thing that struck me when we were at the hearing together was that there wasn't a lot of people on our side. The CMA had brought a lot of doctors. I think there were just a few doctors on our side. And what information I got was that the legislators who were trying to address the vaccine exemption system and try to correct it were worried that too many people from our side that were supporting the bill would create tension or create drama. And so they were trying to keep things quiet. Or had you heard about that? And how does that actually work with like the idea of the hearing and having people come and be loud about it?
Absolutely. So when the original bills in 2015 and 2019 came out, families were up in arms, of course, with a passion to protect their children and to protect their families. So there were literally busloads of parents going up to Sacramento and expressing their concerns. It did create a little bit of trauma for both sides. That the staff were very overwhelmed with upset parents, and the parents were very upset because they felt political processes in California were just working against them. And I think that did create a little bit of PTSD for everybody, I think us included. So when this bill came about,
just to clarify, this is Bill 1377 that we were recently in Sacramento for. Yes.
Yes. So we actually had a meeting with the committee staff ahead of the hearing. And they asked us, what is it going to look like? Who's going to be showing up to this? Do we need to get extra security? Do we need this to make this a special point of order? What kind of protections do we need to put in place to protect the legislators and their staff? And so they had like a very protective guard up about anybody who would come up and talk about it. And I think because of that as well, they didn't make it a big public announcement that this bill is going to be heard. Come and share your position on the bill. It was very different and very last minute bill introduction.
Yeah, they put it through very quickly. I think it was a week from announcement. And then the very next week they had the hearing. So people weren't even aware the bill was happening. And then, so again, going to Sacramento, that's a feat, especially in Southern California. It's not a short drive or you have to fly. And most of these people are parents that have small kids. So it's a little bit more difficult to go there. So I think they purposely got that quickly because they wanted to hurry up and get it out because they did not want to deal with the headache. And that's unfortunate because it's just showing that they really didn't want to hear what the parents had to say and seeing the effects of their policies and how it's impacting people there. And that is part of our reason why we are trying to bridge that gap and get them represented at informational hearings. So we'll have selected people there to represent the masses. But we want to do this as professionally as possible, but all sides need to be represented.
So one of the things that struck me that when I first met you guys kind of as a group and saw and found out more about what you're doing is, I found it reassuring, is when I asked you about the legislative attitudes now versus in 2020 when COVID happened. And you had told me that there has been a change in attitudes of the legislators and their aides. Can you tell us about that, how things have changed and shifted over the past 6 years?
Sure, I would be happy to tell you, because I think I've had several very funky experiences, I would say, when it comes to the topic and how even staff has been able to understand the topic itself and then how they speak to us about the vaccine policies. In the beginning of this, I had some really contentious meetings. I mean, when I first started lobbying, I still am very shy. I'm very reserved. And for me to step into this role of an advocate and say, you know what, by any means necessary, I'm just going to step up and not be shy. And
shy, really? I mean, I've seen you with people.
No, extremely shy.
I
was
with the legislators.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you're passionate about something, it's like nothing can get in my way. I mean, there's that fire that burns so deeply because all I'm thinking about is my kids being that why. But I think being able to step into that role to start advocating for people and really wanting to make that full impact. I mean, it really does something to you and your confidence. But I think we've hit a point now where, we can't be the only ones doing it and saying these things. It has to be a collective effort between a lot of people to get their stories up there. But, it's funny that you saw that and experienced that. And I'm so happy that you captured those moments because there's times where I'm like, did we do enough? Did I say enough? Did I chase enough people down? And the footage that you got was like, you know what? I can happily say I did my piece. I worked my hardest at it.
I think you guys are just getting started and it gives me so much hope to see you work.
Yeah. And, you experienced, I think the after effect of those conversations, going back to when I had first started, going into these meetings, I was so nervous and shy. Like my first meeting, I was reading off of a paper because I couldn't even come up with just the confidence to speak with my personal legislator. And, I had some staff members that I just got I hear you. And then I had others that would sit there and push and push and push on every argument. I mean, one of my most contentious meetings was with a staffer who had told me he only took my meeting because I was Latina. And he thought it was a bunch of white whole food yoga moms on this issue. And I was like, wow, this is new. This is different. But you know what? I need to really press him and have this conversation with him. So anytime I'd bring up a point, he would bring something back at me and say, well, my sister had the swine flu and she got sick from the swine flu. So this is why I believe in this. And I said, okay, I understand. I sat there with him. We went, point for point. And I walked away from that meeting saying, you know what? I just have to agree to disagree here. That's it. We're not on the same page and that's fine. But I know I did my due diligence by speaking with him. Fast forward to just a few years ago when the HPV bill, AB 659, had come about, I went to talk to him and his perspective was still the same. And again, he had family that had experienced COVID and personal experiences. So I said, you know what? I hear you. And I know we're on different spectrums here, but when it comes to the mandate issue, when it comes to the legal side of things, I would really like you to consider this. So we built this relationship where, again, we don't see eye to eye on this, but we can agree that you can be pro-vaccine, but anti-mandate. And how do we get to the point where we remain anti-mandate across the board in California? So again, it shows just how much the personal experience from people the last years through COVID have changed their perspective on these conversations and on these issues. I mean, we've had people that have told us their best friend didn't graduate, high school with them because they were religious and for religious reasons did not receive the COVID vaccine. And to them, it was like, that was heartbreaking to me. I think by us being able to really find, like you mentioned, those pressure points for specific people and talk to them about their personal experience with these laws helps us build that relationship with them, but also navigate that conversation towards a place of accountability and action and making sure that we're finally fixing and amending what needs to be done. Because we've explained the whole lay of the land. You've lived it. I've now walked you through it. So jump in the boat and help us because we have to get this done. So it's changed. I know Darlene's had a lot of similar experiences. I think we've had a diverse array of meetings the last several years.
You said about, the only reason he took that meeting with you was because you were not white. I mean, first of all, he said the quiet part out loud that he shouldn't have said, right? Because he's characterizing all these other moms who are concerned as tofu yoga moms, which is really a very biased view of California citizens who are concerned about something. And it's also probably a very biased view because he's not taking into account the minorities may not have that ability to be as vocal because they may not have as much money, some of them or a lot of them. And that doesn't mean that they are not as concerned. He may not see them as much, but they may be as concerned, which I understand. So now he's like seeing you as like the one person who came up or whatever, or just one of the few people who are minority who came up and talked about it. But that doesn't mean that other people aren't, that other non-white people aren't concerned about it, number one. And that doesn't mean that the white people who are concerned about this issue should be brushed aside and viewed dismissively as tofu yoga moms. Like it's that to me is frightening.
It's sickening. It's really sickening. I really want to press home how sickening it is that we are doing this to so many families that have these, again, lived experiences. These are families that are stepping up and saying, hey, I'm publicizing and talking to you about my children's personal health information and their personal health journey. I mean, any family that takes so much of them to sit there and even have these conversations. So, to be told that just because of your color, it doesn't apply. These children are not Democrats and Republicans. These children they're children with these, specific health choices and families with specific health choices that we've seen it affect people across the board. And it's just really frustrating to hear things like that. And we've also recently have experienced that with Kris and myself, even in some offices where we met with a senator and acknowledged me and it was, oh, hello. And then she looks at Kris and it was a very stern, like, what are you doing here? And it's like, we're colleagues. What do you mean? We're here together. Just because we're different ethnicities, that has nothing to do with anything. We're here representing families at the end of the day, but it shows you the mentality, unfortunately, of some of the legislators in California. But again, that is why it's so important for everyone to show up. I mean, every demographic. And that's something we've seen through our grassroots work the last few years is how many people this has affected. Socioeconomic status does not matter. I mean, it truly does not matter. If we continue down this path of not listening to certain people because of X, Y, and Z, while they're also preaching about implicit bias, like this is the policies are not making sense with what you're preaching and what you're doing, So I love that you mentioned the bias. That was actually something we had argued during SB 276 as well, that these laws do create implicit bias for doctors now, right? You're making a choice to not possibly vaccinate your kid. Well, I can't even see you in my practice anymore.
It's not even implicit.
That's just straight
That's
up.
outright explicit bias,
Yes.
It's unethical behavior for a doctor to not see a patient just because they've
Right.
refused vaccination. Although some argue, hey, you're putting people at risk, which is, I wanted to ask you this because you're all mothers. There are some mothers who disagree with you. And they say, and that's what they'll tell their legislators because they're concerned about that. This person is putting my special needs or child with special health needs who I want to go to school and have a public education. They're putting them at risk by not wanting to vaccinate their child. It's very selfish of them to not want to vaccinate their child because my child is going to be at risk and my child deserves a public education or private school education. What's your response to that?
The protocols that were in place before the laws ever changed at all were actually effective. And the premise of the law change was the Disneyland outbreak that happened in 2015. There was over 100 cases of people getting measles. It spread to other states and other countries. But when you review the CDC after report, there is literally no mention of school transmission. So they talk about close contact transmission, all the different ways that people contracted measles from the amusement park outbreak, and there's no mention of school transmission. At the time, the policy was you get the vaccine, or if you get an exemption, you have to stay home for 20 to 28 days, depending on the disease, or until the doctor clears you that it's safe for you to return to school. That was the standard of care, and that was effective for over 40 years. Then because the legislature got scared, oh no, there's a Disneyland outbreak. How are we going to make sure that all the kids get their vaccines? School is a hub. Let's use the school as a hub to make sure that all kids get the shots. And if they don't get the shots, they can't go to school. They thought this is the easy solution, but actually it was a detriment to families and society because they changed a policy that works. And they use the school for a hub to get a medical procedure. And that's just not okay. It took away our informed consent.
So Ben Allen was the author of that law, correct?
Correct.
And now
correct.
he's even saying, oh, this is way different than I had envisioned. It's gone way to an extreme that I didn't even imagine when I wrote this law. So he's backed off on what he...
And to his defense, he was a younger legislator at the time. He was not a parent yet. And so from 2015 to now he's a parent. Now he's a seasoned legislator who understands the intricacies of the impacts of the laws that they create. And he probably sees, now that I'm a parent, maybe I should have had more power for my child's doctor to make this decision. Maybe I shouldn't have supported a bill that would have made it up to the Department of Public Health to decide.
But he's still not super vocal about it, correct? He's not saying, oh, I regret my decision on a public level. He's not going around saying that.
Well, when you're running for another public office, now that he's running for insurance commissioner, I will say, people will say he's great. People will say he's not. Everybody has their specific opinion on that. But for this issue specifically, yes, he has remained quiet. He's helping, but from behind the scenes. For example, he chose to do the letter rather than introduce a bill himself. He chose to co-author a bill, but he didn't want to use any of his own bill to move this forward in his last year in office. But I think the fact that he's running for office, he's trying to be careful so he doesn't upset any campaign donors or anything like that, potential donors. He's trying to stay neutral as much as possible.
I think it's so great to have you guys there. Your finger is on the pulse of different legislators' personalities, their offices, their aides, what's going on. You follow this so closely so that I can ask you this stuff and oh, he's doing this because of this. Your knowledge of the intricacies of the situation, you guys, is so, so invaluable. And that's why I really appreciate that you guys are out there pounding the pavement, taking those flights multiple times a week, away from your families. I totally understand that sacrifice, too, that you're making. So you can understand things that are going on, create those relationships, and then be able to come back and tell us the intricacies of how things are playing out and the different personalities and the different people's plans, and so that we can be politically savvy about next steps. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was that your organization, Informed Policy Advocates, does have a lobbyist, a part-time lobbyist, which is rare for a medical rights organization to have in California. So can you tell me about the role of the lobbyist and what the lobby group has been doing for your organization and how you'd like to expand that in the future?
Sure. We have two registered lobbyists. Tom and Brina Sheehy are amazing. And Tom Sheehy has been in the political arena since Governor Schwarzenegger. He was his finance guy. He did the numbers for him. So he would sit in the budget committee hearings and decide, is this bill too expensive or not? So he knows the ins and outs of how a bill gets introduced all the way to how it gets signed by the governor. So him and his partner have been representing us, and they have been doing a phenomenal job because our organization, we're all about deliberate strategy, and our goal is to change the law. So anything that needs to happen to get us to that end goal, they have been holding our hands along the way, getting us in backdoor meetings, setting us up for the important meetings that need to happen, even with our opposition. Getting us a meeting with the CMA, getting us meetings with all of the different committee and stakeholders that are necessary to make sure that we have all the data that we need to get a law passed, and having all of the relationships that need to be had in order to get a bill passed.
So are you actively now fundraising to get your lobbyists to come on full time? What are your goals with that?
Yes, we are definitely actively fundraising to make sure that we have him full time and representing us and our families. One thing, like I had mentioned earlier, is the timing of this issue and the COVID fatigue that people are facing in the state legislature. We want to make sure we're keeping this issue at the top of their mind, the top of their priority list as well, before too much time passes and then legislators are like, well, this is just what it is, and we're comfortable with it because it's working, right? We're not hearing enough families talking about this. So by being able to have him there full time, it's not only representing our organization, but every single family that is invested into this medical freedom fight and wants to be able to either enroll their children in school or move their family back to California to either, educate and raise their kids here or their grandkids here. So it's for the benefit of everybody at the end of the day.
I think one of the key things about the fundraising that we need to get this to the finish line is that our registered lobbyists are currently only able to help us as a part-time. If we are able to fund them full-time 12 months out of the year, they're going to be able to have meetings every day with legislators and staff, telling them about our data, telling them about what the doctor's viewpoint is on the issue, telling them about what the parents' experiences are, what the children's experiences are, and getting that culture change that we need to shift the legislators' opinion on this issue. We have moved the needle, but we need to get the ball rolling. That's what we really need to do.
With that in the funding, we would be able to go full court press because we know the playbook of the opposition. They have deep, deep pockets, tons of money. We know what they are capable of. We want to be able to level the playing field a little bit. And if we can get the funding, we know we can get this over the finish line. So that is why it's so vital that we have the lobbyists and what other agencies to help us navigate and advocate on all channels.
So what you mean by deep pockets is like CMA, who's really against bringing choice back to individual doctors, is funded by pharma. Other deep pockets I'm assuming you mean pharma, but are there other deep pockets that you guys are currently trying to counter?
I mean, it's definitely that. And, what they call the dark money in politics. I think that it's not only just pharma, but they're lobbying both sides of the parties. They're lobbying everybody and maxing out their contributions to everybody as well. So we're up against not only pharma, but then nonprofit organizations that they've also splintered off and created that has the funding and the money from personal donors, other organizations to really funnel and push the agenda of every child here needs to have every single vaccine with no exemptions, no exceptions, because we want to see every single child vaccinated, not to have immunity, but vaccinated. So, it goes back to what are you guys really advocating for? And is this really on behalf of the people or on behalf of the trade associations that are funneling the money back in? And it's frustrating.
On the trade associations, you got to go deep, deep dive on just all the trade associations involved in this. AAP, there's only about 50 to 60% of the U.S. pediatricians are members of that. The CMA, there's only 30 to 35. The ACAP is about 10 to 15%. The ACOG, that's 45%. So not all doctors are being represented. These are trade associations. And if you look at who their actual sponsors are and how much money is allocated to lobbying, you're going to see where the actual boards that make any decisions on policies, who are their stakeholders and who are they listening to? There are doctors that are just paying their membership dues, or what they do is they give student doctors or those who come in residence, oh, we'll give you a free membership. That's boosting their numbers. But they really have no say in what this trade association is doing. It's just a nice looking stamp on your certificate when you walk in the doctor's office. But we've seen how these trade associations have kind of been hijacked by their stakeholders and are not representing even the mission statements that they put out there. So yeah, without getting too deep into it, you got to always follow the trail of the money. Where's that source coming from? And then you're going to find your answers. So yes, it is a David and Goliath battle, but we have that passion and we have to do this for our children and the future of children, all the families here, because again, with California, so goes the nation. We have to hold the line here. Because if there's certain legislator or former legislator that is running for Congress now, and he's going to bring that policy nationwide if he gets elected. These are the things we are trying to educate the public on. It's not just this one issue. It is a whole umbrella of things that all about boils down to informed consent, and where they are now making it coerced consent. And it's more about stakeholders say, as opposed to your personal autonomy. And this is a very scary thing that keeps me up at night of what direction we have been going. We have to turn this around.
What we've observed is with the bills that go through the legislative process, there magically appears an organization that's opposed to us. So in the beginning, it was Vaccinate California. Their objective was to make sure that all kids are vaccinated. That just happened to go along with SB 277. When there was a bill that would make it so that 12-year-olds could get vaccines without parent consent, there magically appeared an organization called Teens for Vaccines that somehow wanted to make it so that kids could get their vaccines without parent consent. And then there was another organization with COVID called Protect Us, which was about, again, making sure that everybody gets vaccinated. So those deep pockets that Jessica are talking about are funding what becomes our opposition. And we are mindful enough to get ahead of that. So with Informed Policy Advocates, we are aware of the legislative process, what happens in the legislative processes and what we have to prepare for, what hurdles we're going to have to face, and we're prepared for that.
So one of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation is the importance of cohesion and a strategic plan and cooperation and showing our numbers. And I've seen you guys work with different groups on our side, groups that are supposed to be advocating together. And then there's also some lack of cohesion as well. What do you guys think it takes for like-minded groups on our side to be able to work together? Given that some people are super passionate, some people are less vocal in a caustic way, there's different personalities involved. What's it going to take to really bring people together, egos aside, and really be working toward this common goal?
I think when we keep it focused on the why, and if the why stays for the children, and if the why stays for our medical freedom, and if the why stays for our informed consent and being protected as a consumer when it comes to medical intervention, then the ego and all of that can go to the wayside. Now, are people able to do that? Maybe, maybe not. Everybody's different. But as for Informed Policy Advocates, we are mission driven and we are willing to collaborate with anybody who stays focused on those things as well. Luckily, we've been able to find people at the Capitol who are passionate about the end goal and willing to collaborate and work with other organizations to get there. And, we welcome and embrace that. We love doing lobby days with other groups. We love bringing up doctors who are able to take a day off to go up, or a nurse organization. Yes, absolutely, because you are the subject matter expert that can speak on the truth. And so anytime we can do that to help move the needle, that's what we're about.
And just to add to that, to have the common goal of each of us rowing in the same direction towards the same end goal of wanting that true medical freedom for our children. And we all may be rowing in separate boats, but if we're using that same stream of water to get there, we can cross that line and get there faster. But it's going to take us not tripping each other along the way and really truly putting egos aside. When you know who your audience is and you remain mission driven, this can absolutely get accomplished. And we're seeing the outcome of that.
I was told a wonderful story by, I'm going to name drop here, Jon Voight, the famous actor Jon Voight. He told me the story yesterday of Benjamin Franklin and the Constitutional Convention. So apparently what had happened was for weeks and weeks and weeks, these guys from all over the new Americas have come together to create the Constitution. They'd originally created the Articles of Confederation. Articles of Confederation was too weak. They really needed a stronger centralized government because things were just too chaotic otherwise. And different states had come together with different visions. There was a lot of fighting. They couldn't agree on anything. And they were just like, how are we ever going to get this Constitution off the ground? It's not going to happen. It's been total disagreements and completely inefficient. And doesn't even look like we're at all going to agree to be able to create this Constitution. And so what he told me is that Benjamin Franklin, in his 80s at that point, got up and made a speech. And he basically said, and I'm saying this because it's, I think, something very important for us to consider. He said, we've been talking, infighting, so many delays, but we've lost sight of what's really important, which is that we're trying to think our way out of this. But there's also, I'm paraphrasing Benjamin Franklin heavily based on what John Boyd told me, there's something bigger, which is our connection to the divine, our connection to God. And what I propose is that every morning at every meeting, we start off with a prayer. And we invite a member of the clergy to come and we pray. And we connect to something that is bigger than us. And maybe, just maybe, that'll help us with this infighting. It'll help us transcend. And the way I was told the story was that when he said that speech and they implemented that, things became so much more smooth. Things went rapidly in the correct direction. And they created that Constitution, which has now been a testament to the spirit of Americas and has been a role model for so many other constitutions in that 250 years. So, or 200 something years, less than 250. So bringing it back to you guys, I know the role of God is very important to most of you, if not all. And it was very powerful for me to join you in prayer in Sacramento. So how has God and your devotion to God played out in your work?
Oh, I absolutely want to go first on this one. I've told my team a number of times. I've prayed for help when my daughter was sick in my arms, covered in rashes with blood issues, liver issues, failure to thrive diagnosis. And I prayed for help. And God gave me my team. And I'm so thankful for that every day. And you're making me cry about it. But I mean, really, God is divine and he gives you what you ask for if you ask it with sincerity and in a manner of wanting to fulfill his will. And I knew that the current laws were not what he wanted for his children. And I prayed for help and he gave me my team.
Amen to that, Darlene. We've actually been very God-centered in this entire battle. I mean, our team, we make it a point every time we lobby to go down to the basement and really set our intention for the day, pray that the legislators' hearts are open to receive the information that we are about to give them, because we understand, to your point, there is a bigger divine being. There is something that is bigger and a higher calling for us. And if we can all connect to that and have that intention as we're walking by and seeing the hearts of others, we're able to connect. And there's a similar quote that I just recently came across too that said, we may disagree on political parties, we may disagree on everything, but when you touch a human, just be a human to human. And that's exactly what we need to do. And that's exactly how we've led, because when you connect with people, just like you said, off of sincerity, off of, I want you to understand, put down your shield because I also want to be understood. It goes a very long way. And God is the only reason we are in the position we're in, because sometimes you have to go through that suffering, as so many people did during COVID, to really open the eyes and expose what has been happening. And God has been gracious enough to allow that silver lining to come out, and that silver lining of people now being knowledgeable, being educated, and having the courage now and the confidence to be able to say, no, I actually don't believe in that. No, I'm going to stand on my convictions, and this is what I truly believe. And we want to be able to bring back religious exemptions and that ability for you to lead your life with God and be able to assert your rights and your beliefs, any capacity, especially when it comes to raising your children and your family.
Sometimes I get a loss for words for this, but like every day I ask God, please put me on the path of what I need to do. I am willing to do it. Just show me what I need to do and put those people in front of me so I can do it. And trying to find my voice. And sometimes I don't have it. I have my two wonderful colleagues that are the voice that needs to be said at the time. So we all have each other's back. We all are cohesive like that. We all are centered on this. Darrlene loves to say God's timing, God's timing. It's like if one of us falters a little bit, or maybe we weren't meant to speak, somebody else steps in, and we just play on each other. We work. It's like an ebb and flow, and I am very grateful that he put me together with these two wonderful women, because they are strong, articulate. They're legislative whisperers, and I've learned so much from them. I have passion, and I research like crazy, but they've taught me how to speak and the right way to phrase things. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for every single person that has come in my path since then, because again, God has been putting me on this path, and he puts these people in my path, and we keep building and growing. And so I just want to put that out there, and that's how it's affected me.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, guys. And I pray for clarity and cohesion and strength and fortitude for you guys who are listening and inspired by this as much as I've been. If you want to support informed policy advocates, which I hope you do, go to IPAction.com. Send a message to the Senate Health Committee through their one-click action campaign that you can access at that address. Again, it's IPAction.com. You can also go and donate to this organization, informedpolicyadvocates.org. There, in addition to donating, you can sign up for their news and updates, subscribe to their newsletter, follow them on social media as well. On Instagram, they're at Informed Policy Advocates. On X, they're at IP Advocates. I'll put the links in the caption. And share this campaign with your friends and your family. I sent it to my various chat groups. Ladies, what are your social media handles so that people can follow you?
You can find me at Kris Dukes. Very easy, at Kris Dukes.
And same, mine is Jessica Cabrera, but with 3 S's and 2 A's at the end of Cabrera. But you guys can find us through our social media website, Informed Policy Advocates. We're very responsive on there, so if you guys had questions, please reach out. If you would just like to engage with us, consult on even your specific situation, we're more than happy to talk to you, and then also more than happy to take you guys with us to Sacramento and, explore it all over again. And Azadeh, whenever you're ready to go back, we'd be happy and delighted to have you.
Let's do it. I'm super excited to continue this collaboration. I'm grateful to each of you, Kris, Jessica, Darrlene, for all that you do for us. Speaking up, organizing, advocating. There's not a lot of people doing this work in the state capitol, guys. So please, please support them. May you be blessed in your important work. Go to informedpolicyadvocates.org, donate, join the IPAction.com campaign. And thanks, guys, for joining us, for listening. If you love this conversation and you want others to know about it, please leave a review of the show so others can find out about it. It's so important. And you can also join the conversation on my Substack, Azadeh Khatibi, MD, MS, MPH, and follow me on my social media to keep up to date on all that's happening. I'm on Instagram at Azadeh Khatibi, MD, MS, MPH, and on X at Azadeh Khatibi, MD. That's it for today, my dears. I wish you peace. I wish you success. I wish you joy. I wish you freedom. Let's go get it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.